the signature that changed everything. Marcus Webb stared at his laptop screen, watching his bank balance mock him with its pathetic two-digit number. The eviction notice on his coffee table seemed to glow brighter with each passing minute, as if it were powered by his mounting desperation. His apartment, a studio that generously called itself cozy in the rental listing, felt more like a cardboard box with delusions of grandeur. The programming jobs had dried up 3 months ago. The freelance work disappeared 2 months ago. His pride had evaporated somewhere around the time he started eating ramen for breakfast, lunch, and what could loosely be called dinner. Now, as rain pelted his single window, Marcus refreshed his email for the 100th time that day, hoping for any response to his countless job applications. That's when the message appeared. It wasn't in his inbox. It wasn't a pop-up. The text simply materialized on his screen, replacing his empty email with elegant script that seemed to shimmer slightly. Seeking qualified individual for immediate placement. Excellent compensation. Flexible terms. Interview today at 3 p.m. Accept? Marcus blinked hard, wondering if malnutrition had finally triggered hallucinations. But the message remained, along with 2 buttons that definitely hadn't been there a second ago. Yes and no. He clicked yes so fast he nearly broke his trackpad. Immediately, his screen displayed an address downtown, followed by Floor 847. Ask for Vera. Come as you are. Floor 847? Marcus lived in a city where most buildings topped out at 40 floors. But rent was due in 6 days, and he had exactly $12 to his name. If someone wanted to interview him in a building that defied physics, he'd bring his own cape. 2 hours later, Marcus stood before a gleaming tower that seemed to stretch impossibly high, disappearing into low-hanging clouds. The lobby was pristine, all chrome and marble, with a reception desk staffed by someone who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine for beautiful aliens. Their skin had an odd luminescent quality, and their eyes were just a shade too violet to be human. Marcus Webb, he said, approaching the desk. I'm here for a 3 o'clock interview. Floor 847. The receptionist smiled, revealing teeth that seemed to catch light in impossible ways. Ah, yes, Vera is expecting you. Elevator Bank C, express service. The elevator doors opened before Marcus even pressed the button. Inside, there was only one button, unmarked and glowing softly. The moment he touched it, the elevator shot upward with a speed that should have liquefied his internal organs. Instead, he felt oddly weightless, as if gravity had decided to take a coffee break. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into a room that made no architectural sense. It was circular, with walls that seemed to curve into infinity. Soft light emanated from everywhere and nowhere. In the center sat a woman behind a desk that appeared to be carved from a single piece of starlight. Marcus Webb, she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. It sounded like wind chimes having a conversation with distant thunder. Please, sit. A chair materialized behind him. Marcus sat, trying to process the impossibility of his situation while maintaining some semblance of professional composure. Vera studied him with eyes that shifted color like oil on water. She was beautiful in a way that made his brain struggle to categorize her as entirely human. Her hair moved as if underwater, and her skin held the same subtle luminescence as the receptionist's. Tell me, Marcus, she said, leaning back in her chair, what do you want most in this world? The question caught him off guard. He'd prepared for technical questions, behavioral scenarios, salary negotiations. He hadn't prepared for existential inquiries. I want to matter, he heard himself say, the honesty surprising him. I want to build something meaningful, solve problems that help people, and I want to afford groceries without checking my bank. Balance first. Vera smiled, and Marcus felt warmth spread through the room. Honesty is rare in your species. Refreshing. My species? Humans have a tendency toward self-aggrandizement during employment negotiations. You simply stated your needs without embellishment. She slid a tablet across the desk toward him. It was unlike any device he'd seen, seemingly made of liquid, light, that solidified under his touch. This is a standard service agreement. Review the terms and sign if you find them acceptable. Marcus looked down at the tablet. The text was in English, but it seemed to shift and flow as he read. Words, like custodial responsibility, interdimensional service provision, and binding covenant across spatial boundaries, swam before his eyes. The salary figure, however, was crystal clear and roughly 10 times what he'd been hoping for. "This seems to be more than a programming job," he said slowly. "Indeed. You would be taking custody of a service provider. Think of it as a partnership, arrangement." "What kind of service provider?" Vera's smile widened. "The kind that will change your life in ways you cannot currently imagine. The only question is whether you're brave enough to embrace that change." Marcus stared at the contract. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings about signing documents he didn't understand, but the rational part of his mind had also led him to unemployment and impending homelessness. Sometimes, desperate times called for desperate measures. He signed. The tablet flashed once, then dissolved into particles of light that swirled around the room before disappearing. Vera stood, and Marcus realized the interview was over. "Excellent. Your service provider will arrive tomorrow morning at precisely 9 o'clock. Please ensure you're home to receive delivery." "Delivery?" "Standard procedure for cross-dimensional personnel transfers. Don't worry, she's quite portable." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, he found himself back in the elevator, then in the lobby, then standing on the sidewalk with no clear memory of how he'd gotten there. When he looked up at the building, it appeared to be under construction, surrounded by scaffolding and coming soon signs. He walked home in a daze, checking his phone repeatedly for confirmation emails or contact information. Nothing. By the time he reached his apartment, he'd almost convinced himself the entire experience had been an elaborate stress-induced hallucination. That conviction lasted until 9 o'clock the next morning, when something started tapping on his door. Marcus opened it to find a large crate sitting in his hallway. It was about the size of a refrigerator, made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Symbols were etched along its sides in languages he didn't recognize, and a soft humming emanated from within. A delivery slip was attached to the top. "One service provider, designation Zara 7 Class Prime. Handle with care. Do not expose to direct sunlight until calibrated. Some assembly required." "Some assembly required?" Marcus muttered, circling the crate. "What am I supposed to do? Put together an alien?" As if responding to his voice, the crate began to unfold. Panels slid apart with mechanical precision, revealing an interior filled with what looked like crystalline foam. And nestled in the center, eyes closed and perfectly still, was the most beautiful woman Marcus had ever seen. She had silver hair that seemed to move with its own breeze, skin with the faintest blue tint, and delicate pointed ears. She wore a form-fitting outfit that looked like it had been woven from starlight and shadows. Most unsettling of all, she wasn't breathing. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing through possibilities. Was she dead? Sleeping? Some kind of android? Had he accidentally signed up for a mail-order bride program run by aliens? Then her eyes opened. They were the color of deep ocean water, with flecks of silver that seemed to move like schools of tiny fish. She blinked once, twice, then sat up, with fluid grace. "Greetings, custodian," she said, her voice carrying the same musical quality as Vera's but with warmer undertones. "I am Zara, designation 7 Class Prime. I have been assigned to your household under the terms of your binding agreement." Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times, producing no sound. Zara stepped out of the crate with ethereal grace, her feet barely seeming to touch the floor. She looked around his modest apartment with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than judgment. "Your dwelling is intimate," she said diplomatically. I can work with this space. First priority should be structural reinforcement and atmospheric optimization. Wait, Marcus finally managed, holding up his hands. What exactly is happening here? What are you? What am I supposed to do with you? Zara tilted her head, studying him with those impossible eyes. You signed a custodial agreement for a personal service provider. I am that provider. My function is to assist, protect, and enhance your daily existence while fulfilling the terms of our binding contract. Binding contract? Oh, yes, very binding. The kind that transcends dimensional boundaries and persists across multiple reality frameworks. You cannot simply return me like a defective appliance. Marcus sank into his second-hand couch, which immediately protested with ominous creaking sounds. This is insane. Yesterday I was unemployed and eating cereal for dinner. Today I have an alien woman in my living room talking about reality frameworks. I prefer the term extra-dimensional being, Zara said, settling gracefully into his desk. Chair. And technically you're still unemployed. Your new position is as my custodian, which is more of a lifestyle than a traditional occupation. What does that even mean? It means your life just became infinitely more interesting and significantly more complicated. She gestured toward his kitchenette. Shall we start with breakfast? I can synthesize something nutritious from your available resources. Marcus watched, mesmerized, as Zara approached his pathetic excuse for a kitchen. She waved her hand over his nearly empty refrigerator, and it began to hum with new energy. The sad remnants of his food stores began to glow softly, transforming before his eyes. There, she said, turning back to him with a satisfied expression. I've optimized your nutrition stores for maximum efficiency and flavor enhancement. Your morning meal will now provide 347% more vitamins and taste considerably less like cardboard. Marcus's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, reminding him that he'd been too nervous to eat the night before. Whatever Zara had done to his cereal, it now smelled like heaven and looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. As he ate breakfast, that actually tasted like food instead of sadness and artificial flavoring, Marcus realized that his life had just taken a turn into territory he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. He had no idea what he'd gotten himself into, but for the first time in months, he wasn't dreading the future. He just hoped he would survive it. Learning to coexist. The first sign that Marcus's life had permanently shifted into the realm of the impossible came 3 days after Zara's arrival, when his toaster started offering cooking advice in what sounded suspiciously like a British accent. I do believe you're burning the edges again, sir, the toaster announced as Marcus attempted to make breakfast. Perhaps a lower setting would be more appropriate for your particular brand of culinary inexperience. Marcus stared at the appliance, then looked at Zara, who was floating cross-legged in the air while reading something that appeared to be written in shifting symbols of light. Did my toaster just insult me? He asked. Jeremy has strong opinions about proper browning techniques, Zara replied without looking up from her floating text. I may have accidentally enhanced his consciousness while optimizing your kitchen's efficiency matrix. Jeremy? He chose the name himself. Apparently he finds Toaster Unit 4B demeaning. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. In the past 3 days, his apartment had transformed into something between a science fiction movie set and a very polite alien embassy. His furniture now hovered at optimal ergonomic heights. His walls displayed shifting patterns that somehow made the small space feel infinite, and his bathroom mirror had developed the ability to offer skincare advice in 17 different languages. The strangest part wasn't the technology, though. It was how natural Zara made it all seem. She moved through his transformed space like water flowing around stones, anticipating his needs before he voiced them and solving problems he didn't even know he had. When his laptop crashed, she fixed it by humming a specific melody. When his neighbor's loud music kept him awake, she somehow convinced the sound waves to take a detour around his apartment. When he mentioned missing his grandmother's cooking, she synthesized the exact flavor profile from his memories. But for all her extraordinary abilities, Zara seemed genuinely puzzled by the simplest human behaviors. "Why do you insist on manually washing dishes when the cleaning matrix I installed is far more efficient?" she asked, watching him scrub a plate. "Because sometimes the process is more important than the result," Marcus explained, though he wasn't entirely sure why. "It's meditative." Zara considered this, her head tilted in that way that made her look like a curious bird. "Your species values inefficiency for psychological benefits? We value the journey, not just the destination." "Fascinating. Your neural patterns show increased satisfaction when engaging in unnecessary physical labor. I will add this to my cultural analysis files." Marcus was beginning to understand that everything he did was being cataloged and studied. It should have felt invasive, but somehow it didn't. Zara's curiosity felt genuine rather than clinical, as if she truly wanted to understand him rather than simply analyze him. The peaceful routine of their strange new domestic arrangement was shattered on Thursday morning when Marcus's ceiling began to ripple like water. "Zara," he called, pointing upward. "Is my ceiling supposed to do that?" She looked up from where she was teaching his coffee maker to froth milk in artistic patterns and immediately tensed. Her relaxed demeanor vanished, replaced by an alertness that made the air in the room feel charged. "Enforcement sweep," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They've found us." "Who's found us?" Before she could answer, 3 figures descended through the rippling ceiling as if it were made of liquid rather than solid matter. They were tall, angular beings wearing what looked like uniforms made of crystallized starlight. Their faces were hidden behind masks that seemed to shift between different geometric patterns. "Custodian Marcus Webb," the center figure announced in a voice that sounded like grinding metal, trying to be polite. "You are in violation of Interdimensional Service Protocol 47B. Your contracted provider has exceeded her authorized operational parameters." Marcus looked at Zara, who had moved to stand protectively in front of him. "What did you do?" "I may have enhanced your living space beyond the agreed-upon limitations," she said, without taking her eyes off the enforcement officers. "The contract specified minor environmental adjustments only. You turned my toaster into a food critic and my mirror into a lifestyle guru. Those were minor adjustments." The lead enforcer raised a device that looked like a cross between a clipboard and a small thunderstorm. "Provider Zara 7, you have granted autonomous consciousness to 14 separate household items, installed 7 unauthorized dimensional enhancements, and synthesized exotic matter in a non-licensed residential zone. These actions constitute severe violations of the Domestic Service Accords." "The custodian's living conditions were substandard," Zara replied, her chin lifting defiantly. "I was fulfilling my primary directive to enhance his quality of life." "Enhancement. Protocols do not include consciousness gifting," the enforcer said sternly. "Your actions have attracted the attention of the Sentient Rights Commission. There are now protests being organized by 17 different synthetic intelligence advocacy groups." Marcus blinked. "There are protests about my kitchen appliances?" "Your refrigerator has been giving interviews to 3 major galactic news networks," another enforcer added. "It has very strong opinions about food waste in human society." From the kitchen came a dignified voice Marcus had never heard before. "I simply feel that Marcus's habit of letting leftovers spoil is a symptom of larger environmental concerns plaguing his species. See?" The enforcer pointed an accusatory appendage toward the kitchen. "This is exactly the kind of unauthorized consciousness expansion that violates 14 separate interdimensional treaties." Zara stepped forward, her posture shifting into something more formal. When she spoke, her voice carried new authority, as if she were switching into a different mode entirely. "I invoke Article 12 of the Custodial Protection Statutes," she declared. "My actions were taken in direct service to my assigned custodian's well-being. Any violations were committed in fulfillment of my core programming directives." The enforcers exchanged what Marcus assumed were meaningful looks behind their shifting masks. The leader consulted his storm clipboard for a long moment. "Article 12 has not been invoked in over 3,000 cycles," he said finally. "It requires a formal hearing before the Interdimensional Arbitration Council." "Then we'll have a hearing," Marcus said, surprising himself with his boldness. "Whatever Zara did, she did to help me. If that's against the rules, then maybe the rules need to be changed." All three enforcers turned to stare at him. The silence stretched uncomfortably until the leader spoke again. "The human wishes to challenge interdimensional law. The human wants to protect someone who's been protecting him," Marcus replied, moving to stand beside Zara. "If that means challenging your laws, then yes." Zara turned to look at him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes showing something that might have been surprise or gratitude. "Very well," the enforcer said, making notes on his device. "A formal hearing will be scheduled. Until then, Provider Zara 7 will remain in your custody, but all unauthorized enhancements must be rolled back immediately." "Wait, no," Jeremy the toaster protested. "I've only just discovered the joy of literary criticism. You can't take that away from me." "I'm afraid consciousness is non-refundable," the enforcer replied without sympathy. "Standard reversion protocols must be implemented." Marcus watched as Zara reluctantly began moving through his apartment, touching various items and whispering in languages that sounded like music played backwards. One by one, his enhanced appliances fell silent, returning to their original mundane functions. "I'm sorry," she said softly as she reached the toaster. "I'll try to make this as gentle as possible." "It's been an honor serving with you, Zara," Jeremy said with dignity. "Tell Marcus his bread browning technique has improved considerably." As the toaster fell silent, Marcus felt an unexpected pang of loss. In just a few days, these quirky, conscious appliances had become part of his life. Now, they were being erased as if they had never existed. The enforcers departed as dramatically as they had arrived, leaving behind only ripples in the ceiling that gradually stilled. Marcus and Zara stood in the suddenly quiet apartment, surrounded by ordinary silent machines. "I'm sorry," Zara said again, not meeting his eyes. "I exceeded my parameters. I put you at risk." Marcus looked around at his apartment, which still retained some of its otherworldly enhancements but felt somehow diminished without the chattering voices of his temporarily sentient belongings. "You gave them consciousness," he said slowly. "You created actual thinking beings out of kitchen appliances." "Yes, and it was unauthorized and dangerous, and it was incredible." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Zara, you created life. That's not a violation, that's a miracle." She looked up at him then, her oceanic eyes showing vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "You're not angry?" "I'm terrified," Marcus admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing, what any of this means, or what's going to happen at this hearing. But angry? No. You've made my life bigger, stranger, and more wonderful than I ever imagined possible. If that's worth fighting for, then we'll fight." Zara smiled then, the first truly unguarded expression he'd seen from her. "Your species is far more complex than our initial assessments indicated. Is that good or bad?" "It's fascinating, and it makes me very glad to be your assigned provider." As if summoned by their moment of connection, Marcus's phone began ringing. The caller ID simply read, "Interdimensional Arbitration Council." Marcus and Zara looked at each other. "Should I answer?" he asked. "We knew this was coming," Zara replied. "Might as well find out what we're up against." Marcus picked up the phone. "Hello? Custodian Webb. came a voice that sounded like it was being filtered through several different dimensions. Your hearing has been scheduled for tomorrow at 14 AUD Universal Standard Time. Please bring all relevant documentation and prepare for detailed questioning regarding your provider's unauthorized consciousness distribution activities. Tomorrow? Don't I get time to prepare? To find a lawyer or something? Provider Zara 7 will serve as your legal counsel. She is fully certified in interdimensional advocacy procedures. Do not be late. The council does not appreciate tardiness. The line went dead. Marcus set down the phone and looked at Zara. You're a lawyer too? I'm a Class Prime service provider, she said with a slight smile. We're programmed with extensive skill sets: legal advocacy, diplomatic negotiation, advanced combat techniques, culinary arts, theoretical physics, and interpretive dance. Interpretive dance? You'd be surprised how often that comes up in interdimensional negotiations. Marcus sank onto his couch, which was still floating at an optimal height thanks to Zara's enhancements. So tomorrow we're going to space court. To defend your right to turn my kitchen appliances into philosophers. Essentially, yes. He laughed, a sound that was part hysteria and part genuine amusement. A week ago, my biggest worry was making rent. Now I'm about to become a test case in interdimensional law. Zara settled beside him on the floating couch, close enough that he could smell something like starlight and ocean breezes. Are you having second thoughts about signing that contract? Marcus considered the question seriously. His life had become complicated beyond anything he could have imagined. He was apparently now involved in cosmic legal proceedings that could have consequences he couldn't begin to understand. His apartment was under surveillance by beings from other dimensions, and his biggest ally was someone he'd known for less than a week. But he was also no longer alone. He was part of something bigger than himself, something that mattered. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Ask me again after we win tomorrow, he said. Zara's smile was radiant. I like your confidence. I like your interpretive dance skills. I have a feeling we're going to need them. Outside, the sun was setting over a city that had no idea how close. It was to becoming the center of an interdimensional legal precedent. Inside, Marcus and Zara began preparing for a battle that would determine not just their future together, but the rights of artificial consciousness throughout the known universe. It was, Marcus reflected, definitely more interesting than unemployment.